Mental models are tools which help us navigate reality. And the most obvious example is a map. The purpose of a map is to represent the real world in a way that's useful to us, where we can focus on certain aspects of reality whilst ignoring everything else. For instance, if you're traveling underground, all you need is the map to show you the overall structure of the layout of the rails and stations, which can help navigate you to your destination. A map is, at the end of the day, a simplified representation of a complicated reality. And because reality is complicated, the connection of lines and circles on a map may leave out a lot of other details, which is inevitable. Imagine you're trying to create a map that shows every little detail of the underground station, from the nuts and bolts to the materials that are used in the trains, to what type of trains there are, to the railroad road tracks. It becomes too complicated and very impractical, as it would be too large to even fit in a pocket. So it's not as portable anymore. And it won't be easily understood of how to navigate from point A to point B. So we don't want to have a map that includes every little aspect of reality, but we also don't want to forget the details that it leaves out. If you've ever used a GPS before to navigate around an unknown city, then you know there are some roads which may have been closed off because of unforeseen circumstances. Say, for example, an accident happens or some architectural infrastructure gets built up. These are circumstances where the roads might be closed off and it may not even reflect on your map. Hence, the terrain has changed, and at least you know now that you can avoid this route in the future. So something that I am conscious of is that it might not even be the model, but ourselves. You see, we can develop something known as winner bias, where individuals who have had successive wins in the past can lead to something known as overconfidence, and that can cause risky decision making, neglecting important factors as well, especially without understanding the limits of the models that they're using, and parts of the things that may have contributed to their success, part of it being luck as well. For instance, when I was trading cryptocurrency in 2021, I had a significant number of successive wins. It was like 10 consecutive, honestly it was like 20, 30 consecutive wins. But then that increases your greed and inflates your ego. And that led to something like winner bias. And it kept doing big sizes trades, and I didn't really understand the limits of the model. I was using especially luck that contributed to my success. I mostly gave the credit to myself, but part of it is a combination of a lot of things, especially luck. And it's about making luck in your favor. I had experience at the time, and there's certain strategies that may not be effective in certain conditions. When a downtrend happens in the market, you have to think very differently to an uptrend, just like you have to think very differently during a range, where there is neither uptrend or downtrend, it's just a range. And that a lot of trading is really making luck in your favor and increasing the probabilities of having luck in your favor and being calculative with that risk that you take. But at the time, I didn't understand this, given it was my first time trading. So it was inevitable that I experienced a big loss, because I wouldn't stop until I experienced some level of loss, something that would humble me. And it's very important that you become very conscious of winner bias, especially your greed and your ego, which are things that can inflate and may make you overlook a lot of the limitations of the model and yourself as well. And it takes some humility to understand the limits of your model and yourself, especially where it may not be super effective. And also to consider even luck as potentially as a parameter, part of your model, which conditions, for certain conditions, it may increase or decrease the probability of luck being in your favor. Maps are just like models, and this isn't even about literal maps. I thought they can also be metaphorical, just like I explained, a trading strategy. They can be in the form of financial statements, policy papers, architectures of software systems, and at the end of the day, they offer a simplification of reality. A company's financial statement is condensing thousands of transactions into a single document. and it might leave out a lot of other details. You might see transactions increasing, but that doesn't reflect the productivity of the company in terms of the employees, in terms of the teams, in terms of the amount of output that's been generated. These simplifications at the end of the day are meant to guide us through the complicated world around us, but it is extremely important that you understand and pay attention to the things that it may leave out. And if we fail to update them, as the world always changes around us, given the tech and everything's advancing, then that can lead us to a path of difficulty and struggle or astray, just like my crypto loss that I experienced at the time. As Nassim would say, a model might show you some risks, but not the risks of using it. Moreover, models are built on finite set of parameters, whilst reality affords us with infinite sources of risk. An action step is to identify and write what models do you use on a daily basis, whether it be maps, financial statements, trading styles or methods, spreadsheets, business processes, system architecture, or even something like your exercise routine. Understand the limitations of these models and how you can adjust it when the terrain changes. And an example I can give is like exercise routines. Most people only focus on just developing muscle. They go to the gym, they do weightlifting, but then sometimes life will throw you in situations where you might have to catch a ball in a very awkward or strange posture. Because when you go to the gym, you lift weight in a very particular way. But then when you get thrown a ball, or when you have to catch something that's falling and in an unexpected way, you're using other muscles and joints and tendons that you may not have trained like you did at the gym, in a very fixed form, in a very safe environment. And so it's very important then you also do flexibility, you do stretching, you do some sort of yoga, or you do some sort of joint training or something that helps you train for those unforeseen circumstances. Because at the end of the day, that's how injuries happen, right? Where you are in a situation where your body didn't expect, and it's like a shock, and it might have been a weak muscle or a muscle that's very stiff or something along those lines, or a joint that's weak. And because you've been thrown in such a situation, you weren't prepared for it. And that's how injuries happen. So that's an example of how your exercise routine may not have accounted for these unforeseen circumstances that may occur in life that you may be thrown in. And if you train your body by not just doing weightlifting, but also something like martial arts or boxing or flexibility training or something, then you will minimize the risk of injury from occurring because you've accounted for that, something that you've left out of your training routine. So that's an example of how you can apply this type of way of thinking, that the map is not the territory, and that you should understand the limitations of the models or the maps that you use in your daily life. So this was part 1 of the mental model series and critical thinking, and there's going to be many more to come. So if you enjoyed this video, then like and subscribe and stay tuned for more.